Welcome to the PowerHaus podcast. I'm Gabrielle Caine, and this show reveals what successful people do differently so you can too. We'll dig into the choices, habits, and turning points behind the results and leave you with one practical step to use each week.
Hey.
Hey, honey. Good afternoon to you. I'm going to ask you to do a quick introduction for those listeners who don't know who Sarah LeRiche is. Would you like to give us a quick idea of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a real estate investor, um, and I'm pretty fortunate to have, uh, built my portfolio over the last decade or so, and I think we've done a pretty good job at that and managed to, keep everything and have executed most projects how we wanted to. I know that the market out there right now has um, not been kind to many people. So we started out just purchasing our own single family home back in 2008, and then came across Income Property and Scott McGilvery and binge watched a bunch of his shows. And we were in a bungalow, and that was the type of property that he was mainly adding basement suites to. That was a common thread in that show. And we were sitting there thinking, like, we should totally be doing this. Like, we're sitting on this and we should be generating an income. He was coming to town, he was speaking. We invested in an education product, and that really got the ball rolling, where we had a split from looking at our primary residence as our home and more as an investment vehicle to grow a portfolio in real estate, really for the long-term wealth that it could generate. So it wasn't about leaving my full-time employment, in a month or so. It was strategic to get me out when it made sense to get me out, and that ended up being just over 5 years after starting to actively invest in real estate. So we took our single family home, we turned it into a legal duplex. That was a whole learning process in and of itself, and probably a whole podcast all by itself, just that process. But we refinanced, we took that money, we did it again, same thing, bought another bungalow, turned that into a duplex. Um, then we wanted to scale up a little bit, so we took some money out of through a refinance. We took 100,000. My mom and brother took 100, like they both invested 100,000. So collectively, we had a little war chest to go buy real estate with, and we bought a triplex and a fourplex and a sixplex in Southern Ontario. Um, we still have the fourplex. We've since sold this was in 2018. We've since sold the sixplex and the triplex. So um, that was a nice jump, but you still have to qualify for properties, not necessarily the sixplex because it has enough doors, but we really wanted to figure out, like, how do you scale? Because we didn't have a ton of money to grow a portfolio. Basically, like, that's where we ended. We bought our three extra assets, and then, okay, that's it. We can't do any more because we're out of money. So we really had to figure out, well, how do we continue to grow our portfolio even though we don't have any of our own capital that we can invest. And that's when we looked into to partnering, and whether it's financial partners and working partners, and just having a lot of conversations. So joining different real estate groups, doing a lot of networking, doing a lot of research. What market should we focus on? What assets should we focus on? What are we looking for in a partner? What are we looking for in an asset? And getting that clarity really helped. So then we added another 6 unit in New Brunswick to our portfolio. And then we really went on a buying spree, and we added, um, what did we add? We added a 6 unit, a 7 unit, a 9 unit, 2 12 units, and 2 8 units, um, all to our portfolio in 1 year. And
Wow.
then, yeah, yeah, it was a busy year, but it's sort of like once you lay the groundwork and you understand what it is that you are setting out to achieve, it becomes much easier. Um, I always use the like when we were looking at every opportunity, you just get like the analysis by like the paralysis by
Paralysis.
analysis. Yeah, where you're just there's only so much bandwidth that you have in a day to look at all the opportunities that are out there. So it wasn't until we said, okay, we are only looking for buildings with this many units, and they must have a debt service coverage ratio of 1.3 so that we can go to the A lenders right out of the gate. So basically, we know that we're going to get lending on the property. It's not a high risk property, that there's value add, meaning that there is deferred maintenance or there is tenant like units that could be turned over, but there's opportunity to grow the value of the asset, but that it is not scary to an A lender on day one, where we know we can get financing right out of the gate. And then knowing our market and who we were teaming up with. And we were living in Ontario at the time, and most of our purchases, well, we were purchasing in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Saskatchewan. So we weren't physically there. We were very reliant on our team, and that was a matter of asking the right questions, doing some heady, like really heavy vetting of your team and who you're partnering with, um, operating with brutal transparency and honesty was essential too. And there's a lot of trust there, and then running the numbers and making sure they make sense. But I think once we knew exactly what all of our roles were and what our objectives were and where we were headed, everything else fell into place. So it was much easier to pick up uh, several buildings, because we had a rinse and repeat model in place at that point, where we knew exactly how it was all going to unfold and work out. And the analogy that I use, that before we had that clarity and made those criteria and stuck to it felt like we were out in a field trying to catch butterflies, and that we were just trying to catch everything. And when you're just out there trying to catch everything, you most likely end up with nothing. But what if you decide you're only going to catch the blue ones? Then you can figure out how to catch one blue one. And then when you figure out how to, then you're like, okay, I know how to catch, then you can get another one. And then you can get another one. And all of a sudden you've figured it out, and it's something that you can rinse and repeat, and all the other butterflies disappear. That's all the noise. That's all the shiny objects and the distractions. So I know that you're interested in chatting about what successful people do differently. And I would say you have to be intentional about where you're going. So if you're just waking up and doing what everybody else is doing and just hoping all the little pieces will shift into place, and you'll end up in a happy, positive place 5, 10, 20 years from now, it's not a really great strategy. So just knowing what it is you're getting up and trying to achieve is huge. And it sounds so like easy and kind of obvious, but it's so easy to just wake up and do what you've always done and what everybody around you is also doing, having the same conversations, just the hamster wheel. of life. And then, that's an exhausting existence. And then when you get home, you don't really have the energy to build an empire or figure out your exit strategy. It's just so much easier to plop on the couch and decide, now I'm just going to park it and veg because I've earned it. And I totally get that. But if you want something different and better, then the first thing you have to do is decide what that is. Like, what is it that you want? Because if you don't know that, then it's really hard to make steps towards achieving what you haven't clearly defined as your goal.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from on that one. And I love the clarity on how you started the idea. I have so many questions, and I'm sure that a lot of the listeners are going to have questions too. If I may, I just wanted to ask a few. One is it's going right back to the beginning, but also looping around to what you were just touching on. And you're saying how it's easy to stay on the hamster wheel, go home, watch TV. Well, I mean, that's how you started. You were watching Scott McGilvery on TV
yep.
and you had an idea and you're like, okay, wait a second, we have a single family home. But first of all, what was your experience with real estate investing when you were watching the show and you own your own home? What was the experience you had at that point and the knowledge?
That's interesting. So my mom was a teacher. I was also a teacher at the time. And she would always take her summers to buy a little rundown house on a nice street, and they would spend the summer flipping. And my brother and I were often part of the renovation crew, whether it was stripping wallpaper or painting trim, or like that was our summer job. So my parents were flipping in the 80s before flipping was a term or there was any shows on TV about it. So I understood the power of real estate as an investment vehicle right as a kid. Um, but I was never interested in doing renovations. I think I was scarred as a child of what it actually meant to get in there and that elbow grease and getting your hands dirty and doing it yourself. So I never considered that I didn't have to be the one doing the renovations for it to still make sense financially, that there was still a good investment and a good return to be had without being the one doing the painting and the sanding and all of the actual work for the project, because I'd only ever seen my parents do everything themselves. So the idea of hiring out, that was a real epiphany, um, in being a part of real estate groups and even watching income property, was that, oh my gosh, this could be really good because we don't have to be the ones. And anybody who knows Nick and I knows that we are not handy. If you have a renovation emergency, we are not who you want to call. We'll know who to call, but it wouldn't be us.
That's
So,
funny on so many levels. I do remember that, yes.
so
But I did see that income property, that raised bungalow. For those of you who don't know, I lived in that house
yeah,
and I lived in the income suite on the main level of it. And I know that you guys did your own tiling, and that was an amazing job. I thought it was fantastic. I loved it. So just kudos to you for attempting to do it and doing it so well.
okay, we did it with the expertise and instruction of my mom, who has done many tiling jobs. So she was on site telling us what to do. Had it been just Nick, Nick and I doing it, it might not have turned out so pretty. So,
Okay. Fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah.
You got the experience under your belt, and now you know from experience that's not something you want to do.
No,
Um,
I enjoy it a little bit, but like, yeah, yeah, no.
okay.
I'm very
Well,
happy to let somebody else do it. Yeah.
I thought it looked fantastic, and I loved it. I fell in love with it the second I walked in, and I was like, okay, I'm home. Side note, this is not one of my questions, but you also both did a really good job of creating a space that felt welcoming. You know how you walk into a room or a building and there's an air about it or an energy?
Mhm.
And sometimes you walk in and you're like, I'm out. I am not, I don't need to see this place. No, this place was so welcoming that the second I walked in, I was like, I'm home. I just knew that I was.
Yeah,
So you guys did a really good job on that too. You can tell there's a lot of love and care put into that place.
thank you. I think that it just, comes down to if you're gonna do something, do it well. So if you're gonna be a landlord, be a good landlord. Like, be somebody that you would wanna rent from. Be a human, uh, and think about, the things that are important to you in how you live, and understand that that's probably important to everybody. And so, yeah, it's the rule of reciprocity, give somebody something that they can take pride in, and they'll more likely to look after it. Um, if you kind of get like what you put out is what you get back. So if you give somebody less than desirable place to live and rent, and they are there because there are no other options, um, that's not good for anybody. And you're not going to do as well as you like. It really does not cost that much more to address the details, and offer a quality product. And when you because the way I view it is that my tenants are my clients, they are my customers. They are what keeps my business going, and so I value them. And I want to make sure that they're looked after as much as I can within reason. Um and that comes back to you too, because you know if you have an adversarial relationship with your clients, whether they're your tenants or you're running some other sort of business, um you know, when it comes time for a turnover, our units are usually left in good condition. They're usually cleaned out. There's usually very minimal damage aside from like where pictures are hung or things like that. So it makes our life a lot easier to go in and turn that unit over and touch it up and fix and clean it and get it ready for the next family to come in and live. Whereas if we were adversarial, or if it was just not a pleasant experience for anybody, then it's going to cost you more money in the long run, because you are going to have damage. You are going to have a little bit of a lack of care for the unit and the appliances and different things like that. So yeah, it's worth it. If you're going to do something, do it well.
That's a really good point there. And it transfers across all platforms, whether it's real estate investing or anything else, that when you want to start a new venture or a new business, a passion project, anything, do it properly, do it thoroughly, and do it well. Do it to the best of your ability. And don't always think that you have it perfect. You should always be open to tweaking and improving and so on and so forth, so that there's room for growth. And I think that's a really good point to take home. One of the things that I did want to ask you is that, once again, we're going back to watching that TV show. You owned your own home and you're watching a TV show, and I think everyone can relate to that, where it's like, okay, I'm sitting in my living room, whether you rent or own, doesn't matter. You're watching a show, you think, wow, that's ambitious, that's exciting, it intrigues me. That sounds also really scary to go beyond that thought and move it into action, where it's like, I was watching a show recently. My guilty pleasure is custom built homes.
Mm,
And I've seen houses that were built out of spare airplane parts, or, built underground, and the only light you get is from skylights. Just all these different architectural designs that are custom and creative and outside the box. And to me, for example, that sounds really scary to take that jump from sitting on my couch to executing this massive idea where I have no experience, no expertise, no who's people to support me in this thing. Because right now, it is nothing but a thought or an idea in my head. How do you get past the fear and into execution, planning and execution to move forward and actually make this a reality?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think basically everybody has moments of epiphanies, of light bulbs, of that they're struck with inspiration or they have a great idea. And it's what you do the next day that makes the difference. So you've had this great light bulb moment. You've had a vision of what could be kind of laid out for you, but most of us don't actually take the next step. And the next step might be just in doing a Google search, inquiring about how you would go about, you know, and you're not going to do it overnight, and nothing's going to come together immediately. But if you're making a little bit of progress every day towards what you're trying to achieve, um, their momentum will build behind that because you'll start to have the right conversations, you'll start to connect with the right people and put the pieces together. The other thing I would add to that is that the why are you motivated to do this probably needs to be pretty powerful. And for me, the why was this was a realistic exit strategy out of the hamster wheel, out of the 9 to 5, out of the full-time job. And that was a very powerful motivator. I think also having the childhood that I did, seeing my parents flip houses, I understood that it was very real, that there was genuine opportunity to be had there. It wasn't, um, it was achievable. And so it was just a matter of figuring out how to do it, and when you don't know, you find out who does. So if you have an idea of something that you want to achieve, just go and find who is already doing that. And maybe they've got a book or a podcast or a group on social media, or maybe they've got something created already that you could join that would help you figure out how to do what they're doing. Um, but yeah, I don't know whether I've answered that, but um, it's really what do you do the next day when you've had that big breakthrough, aha, light bulb, um, inspirational moment? Does it fizzle into oblivion and go nowhere as like that was a nice thought, but I never actually did anything with it? Or are, are you going to do something the next day to get a little bit closer to realizing that? And I mean, if the light bulb is, oh, that's just looks super super cool and I could totally see myself living in an underground house with skylights, that by itself might not be enough of a motivation to actually go through and make it happen. But if it was scratching a bigger itch, so to speak, then there might be more motivation to move it forward. So I guess it's the why behind it. What's the motivation for taking the next step?
What's
Yeah.
your why?
My why is to have my time back to, you know, that is completely it. That if I want to, book a trip next week to wherever we want to go, that there is nobody that I have to check with, no vacation time I have to run by anybody or get approval on, or that my time is completely mine. And if I choose to sit and watch the birds at the feeder for an hour, like, that's what I'm doing that for that hour, and I'm okay with that, and that is totally what the goal is just to have the time to do with it as I choose. So, that is, to me, the ultimate freedom.
I love that why. That's a strong why.
Yeah,
I remember the days when I had to get approval and my brain never actually worked that way. I never saw myself as reaching adulthood and having to ask permission to take a vacation. I never understood why that was a thing. And so I approached it, even when I was working for bigger companies, uh, as I'm being nice and I'm informing you that this is when I'm taking time off and I'm going to give you a great amount of notice. It might be 6 months, it might be a year, but I'm letting you know in advance. I'm booking a vacation. I won't be in the country. So this is the time that I'm not available.
yeah,
And they still saw it as approval, and I never did. And I think that should have been my first indication right there that I wasn't meant to live my life by someone else's rules and permission.
yeah,
And I think that there's a lot of people out there that feel the same way, having to raise your hand, having to walk in line, having to do what you're told, ask permission to take a washroom break. I can't. I just can't. And then we all work so hard to reach retirement so that we can do exactly what we want. But that's on average, what, 65, I think,
mhm,
to say that that's when you're ready to do whatever you want. Um, and to want to strive for that earlier than that, I think is very reasonable to say the least.
yeah.
So, yeah, I love your why, and I completely resonate with that one for sure. I want the freedom to say, no, I'm sleeping in today. Or no, I'm sick and I'm just gonna sleep for a bit longer or whatever it is. Oh, the weather's nice. I think I'll take a walk, you know? Why not?
Well, when you're working for somebody else, you're building someone else's dream and business and reality, and they need to know when you're gonna be away because it's impacts their business and what they're trying to grow. But if you can either do that or you can focus on building your own, which is much scarier, and oftentimes you work a lot harder. Um, but yeah, I would rather invest my time in building something, for myself than, you know, toiling to build someone else's dream. Um, because you're one or the other. And I remember having quite an epiphany when I was in a job interview, and I was so confident that the person across the desk from me would be out of their mind not to hire me, because I knew that I would do everything in my power to execute the role to the best of my ability, and that if they didn't hire me, they'd be making a huge mistake, because I was definitely, um, going to give it my all, and that they didn't necessarily know that. And when I stepped away, and they did hire me, by the way, that was a teaching position, my first teaching job that I got. um but it just made me realize, like, I was so able to sell myself and believe wholeheartedly that I was the best person for the job that I was interviewing for, um, that could if I believed that I was who they needed and I had all these attributes to do what they needed me to do for their business, could I do that for myself? Like, and I don't know whether I'm articulating this quite right, but it was sort of like I could sell my skills and who I was, and that I was the best candidate for somebody to hire me, but would I hire me? Like, could I take the leap and have the same level of confidence? Like, could I bet on myself?
Mhm.
I'm asking them to bet on me, but would I bet on me? Like, could I step away and actually build my own empire knowing and do I have the same belief in myself if I'm building this for myself? It's like I had all this belief in myself when I was going to be an employee and building this for somebody else. But did I have that same level of faith and confidence in myself to build my own empire? And and that was a big moment where I realized like I had to be able to have that same faith and belief that I was the right person to build my own empire and that I was capable of it. So it was, I don't know whether I've explained that well or not, but
I think you got it quite clearly. If I understand you correctly, it's that mindset shift of I'm selling myself. I'm putting all this time and energy and belief that I can do the job you want me to do. But can you take that belief and turn it on yourself and say, I can create a venture and I can do this and I can build something on my own instead of doing it for someone else? What if I did it for myself?
yeah,
Is that
totally.
right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that. Speaking for yourself and advocating for yourself, I think is such a strong point. You have to believe in yourself enough to know that you can do it instead of completely relying on someone else or another business to build the opportunity and make it successful. You know that you can fulfill that one role, but can you put the pieces together all around it? It's not just one role that creates that opportunity and success. It's all the ones kind of like the gears in a clock that all work together to create something that's going to amount to something that's successful for everyone involved.
yeah,
And I think that's where the trust and faith in yourself converts to, okay, I can do this one, but what else can I do? How passionate am I about it as well? Because then your why ties into it of how passionate am I? And then what attaches to that is I'm going to say like the day that you discover something that you love and you're so passionate about that much is the day that you stop working because you're working your passion. So it doesn't matter if you're doing it 12 hours a day because you love it. Does that resonate with you? Does that make sense at all to you?
it makes sense. And I would say um there's definitely pieces of putting together our art portfolio and working for ourselves that I absolutely loved. Like I loved, I've never been busier than when I left a job and decided to go our own direction and build our own business and portfolio, um, which is great. And there's things that I thoroughly enjoyed and loved about it. But you get several years in of filing corporate tax returns and getting emails about floods and all the things that could happen in a building. Like you own something long enough, you're going to go through all of it. um and so I'm not necessarily in love with being a real estate investor. I'm in love with the lifestyle that it creates for me. um and so that is what I'm in love with. um but yeah, I mean, for Nick as an example, if all he needed to do was make music and get paid for it, that would be a perfect example of, he could easily put in a 12-15 hour day and enjoy every ounce of it. um I definitely enjoyed building our business and learning everything that we've learned, but um it was a means to an end too. Like there was definitely like we're doing this and figuring it all out and having long sleepless uh days and nights, but we know what the outcome is. And I didn't hate it either. Like I loved being my own boss and having that autonomy. But yeah, not every piece of it is rainbows and lollipops for sure. There is, but that's just what it is. I would take the shittiest day working for myself over the best day working for someone else.
That's golden right there. I really like that.
So, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So how did you you had a little bit of background and experience with your parents and summers and hands-on and just seeing how things kind of worked and I'm sure that from a kid's perspective, depending on how old you were, you get somewhat of a surface level of this is
Mhm.
how flooring is done and so on and so forth. But what if there's intricate details that go behind the scenes as well, and administration and collaboration and all that kind of stuff. So um did you have to seek out education? How did you know what questions to ask and what step to take next in order to, fuel that vehicle to take you to your freedom and your time?
Yeah. We knew enough to get started, and we certainly learned a lot on the way. So you don't have to have it all figured out to take action. You just have to have enough figured out that you're not going to, be driving a bus right off a cliff, with whatever project that you're doing. But certainly we made tons of mistakes and learned a lot. Obviously, you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. And yeah, you learn and you refine as you go. So like filing corporate taxes, I had no no clue what was involved, or getting a shareholders agreement, or all the things to look for and ask and be aware of in your due diligence phase and acquiring a building. And um, thankfully, between a combination of knowing enough that we weren't steered horribly wrong, that everything was fixable, learnable, and no major errors, like, insurmountable obstacles were created. But we also, our process for acquiring a building now is a direct result of all the experience that we had, and every building, that process became more refined and clear, um, and streamlined, and just you get better as you go. But a lot of us are afraid of asking questions that make you look stupid, and you feel like you need to be the expert, or at least show up as an expert. And I think you need to show up as a professional, but you don't need to know everything. So that's, I think, one of Nick's most uh valuable, uh, underestimated, um, assets that he has, is his willingness to ask the questions that most people wouldn't.
I love that. And I
Yeah,
agree. That's actually something that's going to make people respect you more. If you show up and you act like you know everything, eventually someone's going to discover that and they're not going to respect it very much. But if you're honest and you own up to it and say, you know what, I'm actually not an expert in that department, or,
yeah,
please, I'm pleading ignorance right now. Please explain that to me.
yeah,
I think I would respect that. I would definitely respect that a whole lot more.
yeah, yeah, totally. So the ability to, you know, be fearless in the questions that you ask, it is going to save you a ton too, whether it's your contractor, your lawyer, your accountant. Like, I think, we have a tendency to smile and nod when something is said that we don't understand because we don't want to point out that we don't understand. And that is missing a huge opportunity for learning and for clarity, and potentially saving you a huge pitfall that you just smiled and nodded through, and now you've kind of committed to something you didn't really realize you were committing to. So, don't be afraid to not be the expert when you aren't the expert, but be professional in the sense that, you honor your commitments. If you say you're going to show up at 9, be there at 9. It, how you conduct yourself. Because in any business, things are going to not go the way that you expect them to go on various levels, and many times over, and sometimes in the same day many times over. And it's not how you conduct yourself when everything is going well, it's how you conduct yourself when uh, everything's going wrong. And it's you just have to maintain a level of professionalism and consistency, and even tempered, like, um, you need to show up in the same way no matter what's going on. And uh emotions don't move the needle forward. So something might be upsetting, or, whatever the case is, whatever the situation is, just be focused on the solution, not it doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong. Uh, you're if you want to get back at anybody who you feel wronged, you just don't employ their business. That And you just move on from that. But yeah, yeah, a little tangent, but yeah, there you go.
No, I think that's amazing advice though. It really is. And a lot of people need to hear that. And even people who know it, they sometimes need that reminder that if you can't control yourself and you can't control your emotions, how can you control anything else? And how can you be trustworthy? Right.
Yeah, yeah,
I know I wouldn't want to work with someone or work closely with someone who can't control their emotions and they fly off the handle for whatever reason, no matter how big or how small. And then there's that little reminder that there's no place for emotion in business. Otherwise, that's going to cloud your judgment. You're not going to be able to, make clear, sound decisions.
yeah. Well, and it can also just be a waste of time too. Like, you can invest time and energy and effort in airing your grievances, or you can say, well, the objective is X. How do we get there? Let's stay focused and move forward. And because what's done is done, whatever the situation is, and we need to move on. So one that's coming to mind is, we had a roofing company that was replacing a roof on a building, and they did not cover the roof adequately for leaving for the weekend. We had torrential rain that flooded all 3 floors of the building. So we had 3 units where their apartment was not habitable. They needed to be living in an alternate accommodation for months while remediation was happening, while insurance was involved. And that is a stressful situation. Um, but and it's very easy to, you can have emotions for sure. I had many emotions about the roofing company and their lack of care in securing the building before leaving for the weekend, but that doesn't solve anything. So how are we fixing this? What's next? And yeah, that you just,
Wow. I
you know
feel emotions when you tell that story. And I wasn't there. And then not only that, but then you have emotions of people around you who are, probably very upset about their living conditions and what's happened. And then you've got to deal with that too. That sounds like an incredible snowball effect, and being able to,
Yeah.
manage yourself and self-regulate is a huge thing. But that also brings me to another question is, have you ever made, I'm sure that you said that there's tons of mistakes. So
Mm.
what's one of the biggest mistakes that you and or Nick have ever made, and what did you do about it?
Oh my God, there's so many.
Which one?
I think if I could put all of it into one big broad umbrella before picking an actual example, it would be the advice to trust but verify. And the one part of that statement is really easy. Nick and I are trusting by nature for sure. And so when we have a conversation with someone and they say like this is what they're committing to, we trust that that's what's going to happen. And we're really bad at the verify part. So, you know, if you are hiring somebody for any piece of work, um, whether it is a realtor, a lawyer, accountant, a property manager, a contractor, whoever it is that you are hiring, when they are looking for your business, whether good, bad, or otherwise, they're going to more likely than not tell you what you want to hear. And that's great, and everybody's, holding hands and walking into the sunset happily together, initially, but you need to verify that what they're saying holds up. What's their track record? What's their history? What are their Google reviews? Can they show you examples of their work? Do they have testimonials? Do they have other clients that you can talk to about the experience that they had, working with you? Um, what's their willingness to let you look at their track record to believe that they're going to do what they say. And the other thing is with verify, so you had renovations done. Well, everybody has a smartphone and can take a picture and can send a picture in 2 seconds. So you had to go because there was an emergent, like we had one example was a property manager who, without fail, there was some kind of plumbing emergency happening at the building every month. And this was a building that we spent a few $100,000 renovating top to bottom with new plumbing, electric, floors, kitchens, like the works. And we just constantly were having plumbing invoices on our monthly statement, and we were very clear over and over that we didn't want any band-aid solutions. Like, go in there, we don't care what it costs, fix it right so that it's a non-issue, and we are moving on. Like, we don't want this reoccurring problem. And one easy way, uh, quick thing, and we never asked for it, probably because we didn't want to, um, question their integrity of telling us that there was a plumbing emergency, was just to ask for a picture. So there's a toilet overflowing or a leak or a ceiling that's damaged. Show me a picture before, show me a picture after, because you've just invoiced me $1,500 for this. So show me. And we never asked for that. And we have since, well, several years ago, parted ways with this property manager, but it turns out the plumber was their brother. And their brother was making a career out of jobs at our building. And so by not having the verify piece, it cost us a lot of money. And working with the wrong people is going to cost you so much. So everybody wants to be trusting, and it's not that you aren't trusting, but not following up and doing the verify side has been painfully expensive in our experience for many things. Mostly it's renovations that come to mind, or just trusting somebody is going to do right by you because they said they would, and then like the proof is in the pudding, and there's no pudding. So yeah, yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing it. That sounds like a really rough time. How long did you have to endure this situation for?
I well, we unfortunately gave them a year of plumbing monthly invoices until we finally said, "No, this is we need to go a different direction, that we're taking our business elsewhere." Um, so yeah, just trust but verify.
That's really good advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I is there ever, sorry, has there ever been a time where there were a lot of voices saying this is what you should do, or this is what the market's doing, or this is what the majority of the people out there are doing, and you should too? And something inside, like, did you listen, or did something inside your gut say, no, I should go the other way? And that's like an internal tug of war. Have you ever had an experience like that?
totally. Yes, 100%, and thank goodness for Nick, because I would have been very tempted to go with, the flow of the masses and do what everybody else was doing, because it was definitely a tempting shiny object, and, what I'm referring to is the decision to raise equity versus raising debt, and what I mean by that is when we decided to acquire apartment buildings with partners and financial partners specifically, we had an option or where we could have raised the money for a guaranteed interest rate return, and had the project return the initial capital after a set amount of time, where we would have been able to retain 100% of the equity and ownership in that building, or we raise equity instead, where the people that we partner with that bring the money to acquire the building have equity in the building, and rather than a guaranteed monthly interest rate, they have the security of knowing that they have X amount of equity and ownership in that building. That's their recourse and their bit of security. And when money was cheap and interest rates were all-time low, everybody was thought that we were crazy for giving away equity, that we should have been raising debt and owned our assets completely ourselves. Um, but as that is risky, and I'm sure anybody who has done a real estate deal in the last 3 years, I'd say from 2022 to today, um, probably knows very well that those guaranteed high interest rate returns, a lot of them just evaporated, where the money and the deals just, it was a house of cards that couldn't be sustained if anything didn't go exactly the way that they planned it to go. And so, as soon as you have things like interest rates spiking and property taxes spiking and immigration slowing down, so you see a softening in vacancy and in market rents, and like there's all these little things that are out of your control as an investor. But if you are so leveraged and you've structured yourself in a way where everything has to go right in order for you to uh, uh, have success in the project, then the last couple of years wiped you out, most likely. And so we're I am super grateful for Nick, specifically on this front, because he did not want to. We had raised debt before for a big BRRRR project, like the buy, renovate, refinance, rent, repeat kind of strategy, and that was raising debt. That was borrowing money from investors for a guaranteed interest rate return, and then you've got to pay it all back, and if you don't, you run the risk of losing the asset completely. And so high risk, technically high reward. Talk about a learning experience of a building. And thankfully, it was at a time when markets were very forgiving. Money was still cheap. Interest rates were still doable, and the market was appreciating rapidly. So that ended up being a success. But if we were doing that same project today, as our first, knowing what we knew then and making all the same mistakes, we would be underwater, huge, and we would not have been in a position to pay people back. So Nick was afraid of raising equity and raising debt, and thank goodness for that, because we're in a position now where our financial partners have they have equity in the building. And actually, two of our buildings this year, we were able to pull all of their initial capital invested out in refinances. So our investors have 100% of their money back, and they still own 50 to 60% equity, depending on the building and the project. And they have no money in, so their returns are infinite now. And that's awesome, and I'm really proud of us to have that situation in a time when so many people are going belly up and bankrupt in this business. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that sounds so difficult when everyone's doing this. It seems to be the, quote unquote trend
Yeah.
of when the market fluctuates, this is what you do. And it just sounds like a no-brainer. But I love that part that you pointed out where it was if you're, stretched and you have so much debt and everything has to go perfectly in order for it to work, it's just too high risk.
Mhm.
And at that point, you have to kind of put yourself in check and take your emotions out of it. Like, am I too excited about this? Is this something where I'm gambling too much? Is it too high risk? Is it within my tolerance? Many people also have to take into consideration their partner. How does their partner feel, whether it's their life partner, husband, wife, um, business partner? Sometimes it's both. In your case, with you and Nick, it's both.
Yeah.
And you have to take into consideration, how does it affect that person? What happens if this does go belly up, if it goes sideways? Then how do we recover? What's our backup plan? Do we have an exit strategy or multiple exit strategies? Are we capable of that? When we refi, will we qualify for the refi? Can we handle the interest rates at that time without a crystal ball? All these things come into play, and it's got to be difficult. Have you ever had a time where you and Nick just disagreed on something and you guys are in the middle of a project and you're like, okay, this is how it should go, or this is how we should approach it, or how we should exit it? And Nick is like, no, I think it's the opposite direction. You guys had to somehow come together.
Um, Not on a project that we were midway, and nothing that was like a major, like, fundamental difference of opinion in approach or what we should do with the building. But uh, one, and it's, I wouldn't say it's an argument that we have, but it's definitely a difference of opinion. It's when I'm looking at a potential uh, acquisition, I do like to look at the pictures. And he's like, pictures don't tell you anything. You just need to look at the numbers. And I think that's just a personality difference. And um, I can look at the pictures and I'm looking for all sorts of things. I'm not looking at the paint color or the aesthetics of it. I'm looking at, like, how deteriorated is the brick on the outside of the building? How are the tenants living? What is around it? Is there garbage around? What does the streetscape look like? I'll go on Google Maps, and I'll drive virtually up and down the streets and surrounding areas. Like, what's the neighborhood look like? What kind of cars are parked in the driveway? Who's living there? Is the street well maintained? Are people caring for their properties? Is the grass mowed or not mowed? Are there bed sheets and towels and t-shirts being used as curtains and drapery? Um, all of these things give you so much insight that I find a tremendous amount of value at looking at the pictures
I
in a
agree.
listing or in a walkthrough, whereas Nick is that he has no interest in seeing the pictures until, and to be fair, until he knows the numbers make sense. And that does make a lot of sense, because there's no point in getting too granular with the pictures and the details of an area or a building if the numbers totally don't make sense at all. So, but once those numbers do make sense, I see a lot of value in the information that can be gleaned from photos, or even lack of photos. Like, sometimes you get a ton of information just based on how bad the photos are. And you know that the seller is not a professional because they're not hiring a professional. They're hiring their part-time cousin realtor that really does not know what they're doing, because they're taking pictures and they're uploading them upside down. Or they're, like, you can see a listing that is clearly not a professional realtor that's listed. And that is information, and that's an advantage. You're not working with a seasoned vet. And so yeah.
I can totally understand that one. That makes a lot of sense, actually. And I'm with you on that one when it comes to looking at the pictures. That's something that I look for too. I'll do Google Maps and I'll look at the aerial view to see what the roof looks like, to see what the surrounding property looks like. I try to zoom in and see if there's water damage or something that the drywall might reveal that, you otherwise don't look for, ceilings, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then, my partner's the same way, where it's like numbers first. Numbers don't lie. It's all about
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good balance though to have, the two brains that work the different way because they complement each other in that way.
Yeah. I do have a piece I wanted to circle back and touch on with the trust and verify and hiring people, and how you hire them. And one piece of advice that I thought and has been super valuable, and I thought was valuable when I heard it, and that was, hire slow, fire fast. So really take your time in choosing the right uh, people to join your team and to work with. Like, do your due diligence, do that verification piece. Uh, uh, be really diligent about hiring. And when somebody shows you who they are, fire fast, hire slow, fire fast. So if it's not working out, rip that band-aid off, move on, because the time uh, and money lost in hoping that they will come around and do the right thing is time and money that, you know, you could be on and off to the next solution. And that's one of the things that we learned too. Like, we now have a rock star property manager, but it took us more than 5 years to get to that person, because we just kept hoping that who we had was going to work out. And so the reluctance to cut them loose and find the right person, if we would have just been like, trusted the gut, known that it wasn't working out, and said, cut the ties, sorry, we're moving on, and gotten to this person, like, literally we would have tens of thousands of dollars more by making that decisive action sooner. So that's really important piece. And there was another piece, but maybe it'll come back to me, that I wanted to. Oh, yes, it came back to me. Good. Is you should never be the one training your professionals. So, And that's another verify piece. So when we joined different groups and learned what we needed in terms of, well, who was the best accountant for our business that we were doing, and what would be the best lawyer for our business and what we're doing, and the best property manager and the best contractor, and like, did they understand what the objective was? That, for a contractor, we are not living in this home. We do not need marble countertops. We do not, like, this is not a forever luxury house. This is, it needs to be durable. It needs to be clean. It need like the do they understand what the objective is of what we're trying to achieve? And a lot of us are tempted to, you know, we're going to amass this big portfolio of real estate. If we had tried to make that work with our existing accountant, with our existing lawyer, with our existing realtor, that would have been a complete failure, because it's not my job to train the realtor in what I need to be successful, or the accountant or the lawyer. And if you're hiring somebody to assist you in your business, do they know what your business is? And is this what they do? Is this what they specialize in? Like, does your accountant specialize in real estate portfolios? Uh, and the type that you have. Same thing with your lawyer and your realtor. If you're reaching out to a realtor and they specialize in first time home buyers and you're trying to buy a 24 unit building, that is not who you need. And it doesn't matter that they're your aunt or your uncle, your cousin, or your next door neighbor. And they might take it personally when you don't hire them, but it is a business decision. This is not a hobby. This is not like, you're operating a business here. And so you need to hire the right people. And yeah, you shouldn't be explaining this, what you need, to the professional. The professional needs to be the one explaining it to you. So if you find yourself like in that position, you don't have the right person.
Yeah, you make a very great point. I was on a webinar a few days ago, and I heard Wendy Russell talking about something very similar and saying that there was one point where she was, her and her husband Mike were going to purchase a property and they wanted to put on a double offer, and their real estate agent's response was, "I don't think that's legal." And then she's like, okay. And we plan on doing a red herring. And she's like, "I don't even know what that is." And that's a really good indication right there that, maybe you're not talking to the right person that's able to fill the shoes that you need, because having the professionals in those roles, they have to be able to fulfill that role. That's not your job. You focus where you work best so
Hmm.
that you can have other people work where they work best. And then
Yeah.
that's how you have that well-oiled machine, because that also builds a certain level of trust on a level that you can't do on personally with your friends, that you have to do professionally, and you have to trust them. And I think that's another thing too. That's another line where it's like, if you're hiring family and friends, that's delicate, because sometimes you have to, quite often, you have to have difficult conversations, and sometimes you have to put someone in their place, or sometimes you have to say, this is the expectation. Sometimes you have to be firm, and you quite often run into those problems with loved ones that are like, "You don't talk to me like that," or they can get away with it because they're that close to you. So I think drawing that line in the sand is really important too. That's another thing that I found in what you had said, that's really important. And it's hard not to take that personally if someone's like, "Oh, I want to work with you," and it's like, "Oh, I'd love to, but sorry, it's not gonna happen."
Yeah. And that's the brutal honesty and transparency too. Like, um, you know, I do have family members that are real estate agents, but I'd never listed with any of them, and they understood why. Um, well, at least they said they they said they understood. But I mean, you have to do what is right for you and in your business. So
At the end of the day, allowing your emotions, close family and friends, whatever, if you allow that to get in the way, it can be a very costly mistake, and that's what can sink your business.
yeah.
And if you want to be successful, you have to make those right decisions and not allow emotions to get in the way. I have another question. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more? I'm quite intrigued. What goes into building a portfolio, the decisions behind it, what makes you decide to sell, when, who, how, which ones?
Yeah. Uh, Great question. And when we every building that we bought with the intention of it being a long-term hold. So, right there, you'll know that not everything goes how you plan it to go. So, when we purchased a lot of buildings in 2021, the game plan, the rose-colored glasses, rainbows, and lollipops plan was that we were going to add all this value, turn like when the units turned over, we would do some renovations. Market rents had gone up substantially, so we could improve the value of the building that way. And in 2 or 3 years' time, we would have no problem going in, doing a refinance, paying everybody their initial investment back, and then we could just sit on that asset indefinitely and ride off into the sunset and maybe sell it 20 years, 30 years from now. The reality was way different. So interest rates were an all-time low in 2021. And of course, we put 3-year mortgages on them. And so these mortgages came due. Well, actually, we put 2 years on a lot of them. I stand corrected, and three on one or two. So most of our mortgages came due in 2023. Like the worst possible time for these mortgages to come due. And so we had done every like from as the working partner, we had executed everything that we set out to do. So we were feeling pretty good about that. And we had increased the value of these buildings substantially because of uh, our strategy. But when it came time to refinance, the interest rates had tripled from what we had and what we would be moving into. And so it was no longer the option of refinancing and getting anybody money back. That was off the table completely. The What we were staring at was, do we renew, and we're looking at a break even situation because our cost of borrowing has now tripled. So not only are you not getting any of your money back because we can't do a refinance, because we can't take on a higher loan amount at these interest rates. So we're looking at break even, and if anything goes wrong, potentially a cash call. So like if we need to replace a hot water tank or a boiler or a furnace or a roof, like there probably won't be the funds available to do that, so we're taking on a risk. Do we renew this building and break even at best for the next 1, 2, 3 years, and then hope interest rates come down and we're in a better place, and maybe you'll get your money back then, or at least some of it? Or thank goodness we're in a hot real estate market still. Do you want to sell and get a great return on your money now? Well, pretty easy decision for our partners that were financially invested to say, no, no, let's sell. I'll take a great return on my money now. So we were giving no building, with the exception of one, had a return less than 20% annually for the investor uh, when we sold, which is awesome. So for them, so they were invested for 2 to 3 years. They got a fantastic return on their money. Everything was rainbows and lollipops for them, for sure. But for us, we had just gone through this huge, massive exercise in flipping an entire apartment building. And there isn't a whole lot to sink your teeth into when you only own a building for a couple of years. So as the working partners and only getting 20% of the profits once everybody's paid back, that was not a great return for us on time, because the first couple of years of owning a building and turning it over and stabilizing the asset is pretty intensive. And so for the time and energy and effort, it did not feel worthwhile compensation to exit. Awesome for our partners, and we completely understand why they chose that path. Um, and that is, you know, the reality of working with other people, is that it's not just your needs that have to be considered, it's everybody. And a lot of our partners, our deal might have been going really, really well, but we weren't the only deal that they were doing, and they had other deals that were going south and not working out. And so when you're partnering with somebody, you're not just partnering, like, it's not just that deal you have to be considerate of. It's what other deals are they doing? And if those deals go badly, is that going to jeopardize this deal and our plans for it? Because all of a sudden their position is so different than what they expected it to be. So but you do what you have to do. And so we definitely had to sell some buildings, and it's a, you know, it's a positive outcome for sure. I mean, we did make money, and I can't complain about that, and we got a ton of experience. And um a few buildings, everything worked out exactly how we wanted it to, where the investors have all their capital back and they still have their equity portion. So those are the real home run deals in our portfolio. But to answer your question, if we were not in a position where we had to sell because that was the consensus and that was the needs of the majority, how would we choose which ones stayed, which ones went? And I think you never want to be in a position where you're selling because you have to. That's always a position of weakness, and you're probably going to lose money on that. I would sell if the market was cuckoo bananas and I could get an amazing return. So if there was a huge upswing in the market and I could make a great return by selling right now, that would be a serious consideration. So what's like, is the timing right for selling? Does that align with everybody else's objectives? And can we get this money cycling into something new? And then I'd also consider, like, in your portfolio, what's your poorest performing property? Like, is there anything that you just want to cut loose because it's not doing for you what you need? And oftentimes that's a property that you've refinanced where it's just breaking even for you. Like, you've tapped that tree, and it has nothing left to give you, so it might be a good time to move on from it and go create value and equity somewhere else. um yeah, yeah, it's all um the individual asset and who are the people involved, and what are the needs, and what makes the most sense. But you never want to be in a position where it's a terrible market to try to sell and you're so backed in the corner that you have to, because that'll be great for whoever's buying, but it won't be good for you
No,
if
it
you're
sounds
this.
more reactive instead of proactive.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Given your experience now, and all that you and Nick have been through and done and experienced, is there anything that you'd do differently?
Yeah, tons. But it's all as a result of the learning. So I wouldn't change anything that's already happened, because what has happened has been an amazing teacher for how I would adjust moving forward. Nick always, I think partnering strategically with the right people and having it align with your long-term goals is huge. And he often talks about, would you rather have a slice of a watermelon or a whole cherry, or whatever the analogy is. Like, yeah, I could own that whole entire duplex all by myself. Or I could own a percentage of the equity in the 144 unit in Houston, Texas, and that might be more awesome. And no, I don't own all of it all by myself, but who cares, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think aligning yourself with people that have a proven track record, that you've done your due diligence on, and that their business model makes sense now more than ever. There was a time in 2021 is a great example where you could throw a lot of shit against the wall to see what stuck. And if you made some mistakes, the market was super forgiving. If things didn't go how you wanted it to, there was plenty of exit opportunities, and um, you could still get out of it with your shirt on. And I think the market that we're in right now today, you need to look at that wall and see what is already sticking, and do more of that. So, like, picking things that are tried and true, and maybe they're not sexy and exciting and have crazy returns, but there's a good level of optimism, that, and it's based in reality, that it's going to do well. So uh, we have since partnered with people where we can play a small role in a bigger operation, and that aligns with so many things for us, for our investment goals, but also our time goals. So if I can do this one small role in this much larger machine of acquiring uh, multifamily buildings, I already know that I like the investment strategy. I have worked with the team before, so I know they're a solid team. I know that their vetting process for when they underwrite properties is extremely um, meticulous and uncompromising. And so I have a lot of confidence in moving forward, and teaming up with them again. So sometimes we feel like we just need to control all of it and wear every single hat, and uh, that is exhausting and very hard to scale. Whereas when you partner and you can stay in your lane, and know your role and align yourself well, so that everything that you're trying to achieve, it's like ticking all those boxes for you. um that's a sweet spot, you know because yeah, you don't want to. It's good to wear every hat so you know what it is all involved with it, but then it's also good to know what value you bring, and kind of double down on that, and then find your missing pieces. So,
Yeah, I
and
can agree.
yeah, Nick's
Yeah.
done a good.
Knowing your lane, knowing where your strengths lie, but somewhat venturing to fully understand, or to the best of your ability, understand the roles that are linked to what you're doing as well, can also really help each other and build that respect. Because here's one example. I used to be a receiver, probably about quite a while ago in another lifetime. And I had all my paperwork at the end of my shift. And I found that if I checked off a box on a spreadsheet before handing it over to accountables, um, or accounting, sorry, that it saved that lady in that office a substantial amount of time every single day. And all I had to do was check off a box, but nobody told me that. So I took the time to say, hey, what's your role? What do you do? How does what I do affect you? So on and so forth, and vice versa. And all the other roles around me. And then I found out if I simply check off this box, I'm making this person's life a lot easier. It's a
Mhm.
smoother process, less room for mistakes, that kind of thing. And I really love that. And it also built a level of trust between us that, she wasn't so grumpy anymore, or, processes just seemed so much smoother, less mistakes, less redo work kind of thing. And I loved that. So I love that you're thinking of other people around you and you're putting yourself outside of yourself. Um, that's very respectful. It also shows everything that you've said so as far as what goes into making decisions, the thought process, and how you and Nick work together with your team, and how you execute your plans, how you're willing to pivot when things change. You have to be open and flexible to do that. Also shows your integrity, you know, what you're willing to do for your investors. Okay, you took that cut and you parted with some properties that were not a part of the plan so that you could make sure that you build that relationship with your investors, and shows what you guys stand for as a company, and what you're willing to do to make sure that that works.
Mhm.
It shows that you've learned from your mistakes, and I find that so honorable, and I respect that so much. You guys have come up on the other side of this market, with a lot of positive things to say, and a lot of positive stories.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm so proud of you. We met,
Thank
what,
you.
5 years ago, something like that now.
So,
And you guys have come a long way. You guys have done a lot of things between then and now, and even way before I met you. Um, I don't know how much more time you have, but I still have a burning question. Is that okay?
yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Um, has anything ever come up, whether it was a decision that was made or a pivot or a market or something that's happened that's upset you and either angered you, hurt your feelings, or something that just, even if it was parting with a property that you didn't plan on, did anything along the lines upset you or anger you?
That's a good question. Um, well, I mean, interest rates going up, you can shake your fist at the sky and, but why is this happening? For sure. That wasn't awesome, and it's totally out of your control. Um, that's I don't aside from like things that are out of your control, I don't think so. Mm, I mean, there's certainly like moments of frustration where things don't go your way. Um, I'm working on a conversion project right now where, the experience of doing this, I reserve judgment until it's completed as to whether or not I would endeavor to do it again. Um, so, if we get out of it and it is what we hope it to be, then I might be inclined to give it another go. But, yeah, tons of hurdles in there, and, we began that project with a pretty decent amount of experience and knowledge, and still, you know because we haven't done that exact project in that exact location, um there's so much that comes up that you just couldn't have known in advance. You don't know it until it's like right in front of you. But yeah, I think every step that you make has to be based on the direction that you want to ultimately head in. Like, where are you going? So sometimes, whether it's interest rates or market shifting or things that are out of your control, like you've picked a strategy and it's not panning out the way that you liked, or you just don't like it. It's just, you're like, I'll never do that again. So maybe that's an Airbnb, or maybe that's storage units. Like, there are just so many different investment vehicles and niches that you could, zero in on and make a business out of, and all of them are have merit. Um, it's just, does it align with where you're headed? So, are you picking a market and a strategy that will get you where you actually want to go? Like, does it align with what your needs are, So, um, you have to be really intentional about those choices, and I think I mentioned that earlier, when you're asking, like, what successful people do differently, and it is really being intentional about, what am I trying to achieve? So, my goal is, um, to create a portfolio that can subsidize my lifestyle where I have complete freedom of time. Well, if that's my objective, then how do I reverse engineer my steps so that I am getting there? And when one strategy is no longer viable for whatever reason, then the next step that I take, I have to make sure that wherever I'm pivoting is aligning with that same ultimate end goal, right? So, I'm not picking a market because it's in my backyard. I'm not picking a strategy because it's what my, everybody around me is doing. Uh, I'm picking something, a market, because it makes sense for the strategy, because it makes sense for my skill set, and it makes sense for what I'm trying to build in the long run. So, um, you're always going to, no matter what you're trying to do, there's always gonna be stuff that makes you angry, and question your life your life choices, in that moment, but it all, like, just, if you focus on why you are doing what you're doing, then figuring out that path becomes easier, but you really can't set a course in any direction unless you know where it is you're trying to end up. So, always being anchored on that, uh, is helpful.
Have you ever wanted to give up?
Oh, yeah.
Stupid question.
Probably, like, just seriously give up? No, because, like, you're in it and you know that you're gonna have bad days, bad moments, but that, this too shall pass. Like, it's not going to stay. Like, I'm not going to be permanently in flood damage control mode. It will resolve event. Like, it's not a, permanent situation. There will be another side that we will come out of. Um, so, yeah, I mean, sure, in those moments, and I think, um, a certain level of, um, ignorance is helpful when you endeavor, because I you know, we had no idea the amount of work we were actually taking on, and the level of commitment, and the challenges that were ahead. And I remember somebody saying, like, your first year in your own business is the easiest. If you can make it to year 5, then you've really done something. And I remember the first year, like, I thought I was going to die. So, like, oh my god, don't tell me that. And it ended up being true too, but yeah, if your why is strong, and you're anchored, and you, have good, uh, conservative fundamentals, yeah, then you're doing it.
Wow. That's so you've been doing this since 2008, correct?
Well, I would say 2016, actively looking to build a portfolio. 2008 is when we acquired our first asset, our primary residence, and bought our first home. Um, which Nick was not, really that on board with, but
I heard. I think
yeah,
that's another podcast episode too.
just rent. This is so risky. So, yeah, yeah, but,
Oh, goodness.
yeah. W
So, what do you have on the go right now? Do you have, you did mention you have a project, but what do you and Nick have on the go right now?
Nick and I are just, holding the course with our existing properties. One of them is doing well, one refinance is just completed and those investors are paid back. One is just wrapping up in the next month, and then they'll be paid back. And then we're just operating business as usual with the existing assets. I am working on a conversion project in Nova Scotia with my mom and my brother. Nick just shows up and does like periodic inspections to see progress, but he really uh it's not his type of it doesn't interest him. He sees all of the work and the hurdles and challenges, and he's like, you're crazy. But we're doing it anyway. And then he is most likely going to be starting another fund to acquire more multifamilies in the States with the team that he has worked with already on the 144 unit that he is a part owner of, and we're also invested in financially as well. So um but we don't like we're always open to opportunities to acquire buildings in Canada and in markets that we've already worked in, but we're not actively looking and seeking them out. Um, and I think you have to create those opportunities too. It's sort of like a tap that you turn on, and it's very difficult to get the water flowing, like it from a deal flow perspective. You really have to put a lot of time and energy and be top of mind for a lot of people for deals to start to come your way. And then that tap can become like a fire hose pretty quickly where you kind of have to turn it off because you can there's only so many deals that you can take in. But um, the the ability to find those deals has gotten more challenging, um, for sure in Canada. Um, but they're still out there. Absolutely. It's just they're you're not the likelihood of you finding it on realtor.ca is highly unlikely of finding a deal there. You really need to be working uh, different avenues like wholesalers and even property managers, having conversations with property managers because who knows better who the distressed sellers are than them or who the distressed owners are. There's lots of landlords out there that would love to sell their buildings, but they don't want to go through the process of listing, or they think that they have to do all this work in order to list it, that they can't list it in the current conditions. So off market opportunities are definitely where the deals are made, but that requires effort, for sure, beyond like realtor.ca looking around. And yeah, and knowing what type of assets you're going for, and in what markets. Is it growing, is it shrinking? And we could have a whole conversation on researching markets, and how do you know that you've got a good market to invest in, because there's a lot to consider. for sure. But I won't
Wow.
go into all that.
Yeah. If there's one actionable takeaway that our listeners can do today, what would you recommend they do?
I would recommend that they take 15, 20 minutes to write a letter to themselves 10 years from now and describe the their perfect day. What does their life look like? What are they trying to build? So they wake up. Where are they waking up? What is the view? What are they doing? What's on the docket for the day? How are they spending their time and energy? What is the lifestyle that they have created? Because if you can get a real clear vision of what life you want, it's a lot easier to start working towards it.
Agreed. My
Yeah.
letter to myself is a custom built home, and I can smell the salt in the air, so I know I've got an oceanfront property.
Nice.
And open concept. I
Yeah.
love that. So that way when I'm cooking, or maybe my chef is cooking for me, it's open concept and we can have conversation and I can entertain and I can have my loved ones close to me. So I'm going to take your action item and I'm going to write myself a letter today. And I'm not going to fold it up and put it away. I think I'm going to hang it up somewhere so I can see it and it's a constant reminder to push me to move forward.
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer in promoting yourself. And so, do you have a website, socials, a way that people can reach out to you and connect with Sarah and Nick in a way that maybe they're interested in what you've got going on and they want to connect? How would they do that?
Oh, that's a really good question. I removed Facebook off my phone. I'm still technically have an account, but the app is not on my phone any longer. Um,
Smart.
and I have no website, and I'm not actively uh, raising capital for projects. Like I'm really just doing my own things. So Nick is definitely way more out there. So he has like the Instagram and the Facebook and the X and all of that stuff that I don't have. But if somebody wanted to reach out to me, probably the best way would be to email me, which is it is what it is. So it would be my first name, Sarah,
With an
yeah,
H?
with an H, dot last name, LaRiche, which is LERICHE at hotmail.com. And I think that would be the best way of connecting with me if anybody wanted to. I mean, honestly, if we were building and growing, like we did have a website for our business, but because we've got more clarity around where we want to invest our time and energy, that having that piece was not necessary any longer. So we're not maintaining it. But you know, if you are trying to scale and build a business, there's no way around having a presence on social media and a website and like all of those things so that you are very, you know, out there, visible, in communication, posting regularly. Like those are things that you really, really have to do. I'm just so lucky that Nick does that because I don't want to. I'm just fortunate that that's the piece that Nick fills. Thank you, Nick.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your email address because I'm sure that there are people who are going to want to reach out. Thank you very much for being my very first guest, Sarah.
My
Uh,
pleasure. My pleasure.
this is the PowerHaus Podcast with Gabrielle Caine. Know someone who should be on the show? Email info@powerhouspodcast.com. Until next time, do one thing differently today.